Good morning, gentlemen. We'll give everyone some time to join in. People are slowly coming in. Dhruv, you're in Philly. Joe, how about you?
I'm in Atlanta, but I grew up in Maryland.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Atlanta's still warm, I said.
It's still very warm, yeah.
When I first went to Atlanta, I was hanging out and, I think it was middle of summer. It's like, it's really hot. And I asked the gentleman, it's like, I guess that's why they call it Hot Atlanta. He goes, nope, that's not what we call it Hot Atlanta. It's just
Yeah,
really cool down there. That's it.
multiple reasons, yeah. Yeah, it's been a good move though from the DC area, especially. I mean, the housing market's getting crazy here too, but compared to what you can get in DC, Atlanta, you can actually have a yard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to share my screen so everyone knows who we're talking to. All right, we'll just give another couple of minutes for folks to join in. All right, we have a lot of material to cover. We're going to start, and I'm sure people are going to keep coming in. We will have the recording up for anyone who joins a little later. Hello, welcome everyone to the webinar. It's a long title, so we shortened it for the presentation. But today we're going to talk about generative AI. We've been doing a series of these webinars regarding generative AI. And how it applies to various things. But today we're going to focus on how you can use generative AI with the world's leading RPA platform, UiPath. I am honored to be joined by Joe Edwards, Director of Product Marketing at UiPath, and Dhruv Patel, who is a Senior Sales Solution Architect at UiPath. Joe and Dhruv, you just want to give a quick 1-minute thing on your roles at UiPath?
Sure. So I've been with the company now for about 5 years, and I've worked across a bunch of different products as we've gone from the core studio orchestrator robot to now more than 20 products. So these days I'm working on some of our generative AI experiences, UiPath apps, and also I work with our internal center of excellence to keep track of the great ways that they're helping us automate ourselves. So happy to share some stories from that as well.
That's awesome. Dhruv?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Dhruv Patel, Senior Sales Solution Architect. I was a sales engineer as well. So played a few roles and kind of hats working with customers, but really knowledgeable on our products, our capabilities, and really how we can integrate AI, machine learning, both some of the specialized capabilities as well as all the generative AI stuff that's coming up, kind of more top of mind. So excited to show you some demos today and looking forward to the discussion.
Perfect. Just some housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, feel free to use the question and answers functionality within Zoom. Ask any questions. We will answer it as we can. And we will also have some time for questions towards the end of the presentation. We're going to talk about today a few things within generative AI. So I figured I'd open this up first with just a few jargon that we're going to use. I think these should be pretty familiar to everyone. However, they get these terms. A lot of these terms get merged, especially in the Gen AI space. OpenAI is the name of a company, a research and development or deployment organization that created the now infamous ChatGPT. That's the company. A LLM is a large language model, which is a model that is used for prediction of text, really, but it's deeper than that. But LLM refers to a large language model. It is a type of machine learning, an AI model that helps us do quite a few things, and it is the type of model that's behind ChatGPT. We will talk about Azure OpenAI service. As everyone knows, Microsoft has a big investment in OpenAI, the company. Hence, they also expose, like they expose many other of their services, like their cognitive services and their OCR services and things like that. They expose a OpenAI service hosted within Azure with all the Microsoft bells and whistles of security, control, compliance, and everything else that you might want. And that is the Azure OpenAI service is an API service that is hosted by Microsoft that allows us to interact with this LLM. And for those who don't know UiPath, I'm pretty sure everybody here knows UiPath. UiPath is a leading intelligent process automation platform, which is the world's leading. If you read all the analyst reports, I think you guys have something like 34% of the market, while the others are barely touching double digits. I think that's a pretty amazing install base and a market share. So we're glad to be partners with UiPath. We work very closely with their teams. So they have a lot of integrations within their platform that allow intelligent automation. So UiPath is started off as the robotic process automation RPA platform, but is also evolving into adding a lot more intelligent process automation functionality, and it is one of the world's leading automation platforms. With that, I'll hand it over to Joe to go through some of the things. Tell us what's really coming through in UiPath, what's happening, what's there today, what can we expect in the coming months. That'd be great.
Yeah. And again, happy to connect with everybody on this webinar. As you mentioned, this is a very hot topic. Everybody's talking about AI. So we're happy to share some practical examples of the ways that we're leveraging Gen AI in our platform. But before we jump in there, I'd love to set some context, because a lot of times, we've gotten feedback from customers that they're just overwhelmed by the headlines, right? Like, as you mentioned, there's a new LLM announcement every day. Microsoft has one, Amazon, Google. And our perspective is we want to be a simplifier for our customers and help them to choose among the various LLMs so they can mix and match as their purposes may need. And as part of that, we also think about, some of the core personas that are actually impacted by this work. So what I love to do when in these kind of settings is to just set some examples up ahead of time to give you a sense of what it looks like when you have AI-powered automation at your fingertips in the workday. So a few examples of that. You've heard the hype, but what can AI practically do for your team? And a few of these scenes from an AI-powered workday, think about the job of a contact center agent, right? So their job is to make life better for customers who are often calling under duress, right? Like if you've ever been in the contact center as an agent, it's a very stressful gig, right? Like generally people are not calling to congratulate you and thank you for how great your product experience is. So you're dealing with the audience that's angry. They want their solutions solved. They want their problems solved quickly. You're judged on your average handle time and how quickly you can have a resolution. And the really cool thing that customers are doing, even before this LLM reinvigoration, is they've been able to use automation to actually consolidate a lot of the legacy systems that contact center agents have to navigate. So a practical example, and I'll share this story in the chat once I finish up. We have a customer, Fiserv, who has a tremendous story that we just published about how their contact center has used AI-powered automation to actually half the average handle time of their contact center. And that's just a staggering statistic on its own, but I love the way that one of the contact center agents put it, which was that when they installed UiPath, it was like moving from paper to computers. They said it was that kind of a seismic shift for what the contact center could do. So again, practically, as a contact center agent, these tools make your life better. They help you improve average handle time. They help you to do manual repetitive actions such as password resets, appointment scheduling. Before the webinar setup, we were just talking about how hard it could be to find common meeting times, right? AI-powered automation can help you to expedite that process. And ultimately, for your company's bottom line, this means that you have a higher net promoter score, better employee retention, and again, lower average handle time. Another example that I think everybody can relate to is, the experience of someone on the receiving end of a meeting with a recruiter, right? You're trying to get into this company. Often you have to go through a bunch of interview rounds. You have like 5-10 stakeholders across the business. And so we have a lot of recruiting teams who work with us for AI powered automation as well. And examples there, as a recruiter, you want to be the most welcoming possible introduction to your company, right? So you want the candidate experience to be fluid. You want it to be modern. You don't want people to feel like they're jumping through a bunch of hoops. You don't want to have to manually share your listings across different job boards. You really want to be able to focus on the candidate experience. And with specialized AI and automation, you're able to do just that. So you can craft custom copy for your job boards, depending on where you're posting. You can help reduce some of the manual back and forth and scheduling interviews. You can proactively respond when candidates might run into process hiccups. Maybe you send them a coding test and you see that they haven't filled it in within the required amount of time. Rather than a recruiter having to manually check in, you could set that up as an automated email with help from an LLM to draft it. Ultimately, again, for your company, this means more qualified candidates, your networks improve, and ultimately you have higher retention. The other example I'll share here, and it kind of points to our meta point, right? Like, no matter what your role is, as a human, what do you want? As a human, I personally want a fulfilling life that's unburdened by repetitive work. And as a human with an AI assistant, I found it. A couple of practical examples, because I think a lot of times this can come off as marketing and just buzzwords. Again, within UiPath, we use our own technology, and we quarterly will report out on the quote unquote earnings that we have from automations. And we've saved over 1 million hours with our own technology across recruiting, across finance, across marketing. And that ultimately has meant more than $50 million in cost avoidance. So in the chat, I'll share some stories from that as well. But we really want you to know that this is tangible, that even before the ChatGPT explosion of the last year, we've been active in the AI space, and customers have been benefiting from the promises of automation and AI. So without further ado, I will hand it over to my colleague, Dhruv, to show you some exciting demos of what this looks like in action.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Let me share the screen. All right. Okay. So, first, just to give kind of an overview of the business automation platform, UiPath, right? You really have kind of 3 layers, 3 areas where the platform really supports organizations throughout their automation journey, right? And in each of these areas, it's going to help you not only build automations, but start to operationalize AI and machine learning, right? Both specialized AI as well as some of this generative AI stuff that's becoming more and more top of mind, in the news today. First, we have a layer for discover, right? So there's different capabilities and products within the platform that help you discover where there's potential for automation, right? Where there's opportunities to actually build in automation and really get some of that high ROI. Once you have an understanding and kind of a sense of where you want to build these automations, the next step is to actually go and build them, right? And so we have kind of our main development capabilities, but also ways to bring in AI machine learning, which you'll start to see as we move into kind of more of that discussion in the subsequent slides. And then finally, operate, right? One of the key things with both automation as well as bringing in AI machine learning into your organization is going to be, how do you operate this at scale for an enterprise? And you'll start to see that, right? Governance, auditability, traceability, all of that becomes key. Being able to see analytics and understand how your automations and how AI is moving and working within your organization is all going to be key to running a successful automation and AI machine learning program within your organization. Now, diving into more specifically AI-powered automation, right? So you saw that platform slide earlier. Well, AI has been a part of that platform since the beginning, right? This top bucket here under solutions, we've always had AI within the products, right? You have document understanding, AI Center, communications mining, some newer capabilities like Clipboard AI, and even some of the discovery tools, as well as our studio development tool, have all had flavors of AI and machine learning, both generative AI as well as specialized AI, built into the products to help you build automations faster and really tackle some of those complex automation scenarios. Now, with generative AI, right, we fully support all of those generative AI models that were shown on an earlier slide. We have some direct integrations, really making it easy for you to bring those into your automations, but you also can complement all the generative AI capabilities with specialized AI. We have 70 plus specialized AI models that you have access to as part of the UiPath platform. And so you can bring those in for things like computer vision, right? For things like document understanding, data extraction. We have different language analysis models. And so combining generative AI with specialized AI and really orchestrating that end-to-end process is going to make you or enable you to get the most out of your automations and the most out of AI and machine learning. Now, one major and important piece of this whole thing is the infrastructure layer. So within the platform itself, you're going to have the ability to do auditing, to add, to add fine tuning, to add guardrails, right? To do human in the loop through validation station, and to really easily bring in that AI, machine learning, and even generative AI. Really, the key here is going to be having that full end-to-end traceability, right? Knowing how people are using AI, how they're using generative AI, what are the prompts, right? When you start to talk about generative AI, what are the prompts or requests they're asking of AI, and what are those outputs, and being able to go back and really understand how those models were being used in the actual automations. So really, AI is not just within the products themselves, but you're also going to have ways to actually use those within your automations as well.
So that's an interesting thing that you mentioned, Dhruv. I noticed, by the way, this was really interesting evolution. We're seeing a lot more API-based integrations and the execution of everything in the cloud without needing to deploy an agent and things like that. I think those are really cool things. Now I can use all these services and not have to find a container to deploy all of this stuff in to be able to use it.
Yeah. And you touched on something really key there too, right? We're all interacting with generative AI through the chat interfaces, right? Through Bard, through ChatGPT, but really where you're going to get a lot of benefit out of bringing these AI models in is when they're orchestrated through the UiPath platform, automatically executing off in the background, right? And so really kind of taking that power of generative AI and specialized AI to that next level.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so when it comes to AI, right, the UiPath business automation platform is open, right? As we saw on the other slide, right? We have specialized AI models. You can also plug and play and bring in other AI and machine learning. Some we have direct integrations for, but we also have a way to bring your own API connections, so you can seamlessly bring those into your automations. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the flexibility, right? As was mentioned earlier, every week it seems like there's a new LLM or a better LLM or the next version of an LLM. And so to make sure that you're kind of sticking to that cutting edge, sticking to, making sure you're bringing in the best in breed AI and machine learning models into your processes, you want to have a flexible solution that really allows you to plug and play those automation or those AI capabilities into your end-to-end automations. And so that flexibility is built into the platform itself. And then enterprise ready. And when we say enterprise ready, what we really mean is diving to that next level of security, compliance, and governance, right? Adding those guardrails and really making sure that AI is used in a way that you have visibility into and you have control into, right? You hear all these stories of the data that's being sent to some of these models. Where is that going? How is that being used, right? Especially if it's proprietary data. And so you want to have that visibility, but also that ability to set those guardrails, right? Set those prompt guardrails and really make sure that you know how your organization is using AI and what data is being sent to AI and how that information is being used downstream. And so having that full end-to-end auditability, traceability is really key to making sure that you're using AI to both its fullest extent, but also in the safest manner possible, while really still getting the benefits of AI in your organization. And so, we're familiar with specialized AI. I think, we've talked a lot about that, but focusing in on the generative AI capabilities. With the platform itself, there's really 3 areas where we kind of focus in on. The first 2 are all about within the UiPath products, where are we bringing in generative AI? How are we bringing that in, right? Both from a supercharging how you're actually building automations, but also to supercharging some of the AI machine learning capabilities within the product itself. And then that third bucket, right? Exploring novel use cases. And so really the differentiation here is the first 2 buckets are where are we bringing it from a product perspective? And then the third bucket is really how can you start building these automations and plugging in generative AI to tackle some of these more complex scenarios that you might not have been able to tackle previously, right? Or to tackle some existing scenarios in a much more efficient and dynamic way. And so we'll really focus in first on this exploring novel use cases section, show some demos, and then we'll also kind of touch a little bit on sections 1 and 2 as well, so you get kind of a taste as kind of what's coming as part of that platform.
One of the things that you touched upon in the earlier slides, Dhruv, I think it's really, really, really important. I think, MLOps aside, I think a lot of folks don't even have MLOps or in that form. Of course, large organizations have spent time on that. We're still struggling with DevOps, but I think compliance governance is top of mind for everyone. What was sent? What was the response? How do you log it, maintain it, report on it, and all of that is extremely important. And to be doing that through application logs is a pain. But I think one of the big things that UiPath provides is that seamless access to that data and those logs through insights into the business's hand, so that if the auditor comes in, you can say, yes, we logged everything that we sent, we logged everything that came back, and we can tell you what decision was made through which prompt and which response and so on and so forth. I think that's really interesting, because from a governance and compliance standpoint, that's something that's top of mind for everyone. How do we make sure? So putting in a layer before, after what you need to do, I think that's really important, and I think that's a really important aspect that the platform takes care of for you.
Yeah, that and also the just role-based access controls that are built in throughout the platform, right? Because now when you deploy something that's using generative AI, you control who gets to use it, how they get to use it, with a little bit more control, right? If people can just go to generative AI through a browser and start sending data into it, you have no understanding of how they're using it, what they're sending.
Yep.
And also, you get into that discussion of, hey, what is generative AI actually producing? Is it copyrighted material? How can we use it? Should we use it? And so that traceability kind of takes that next level of safeguards and control when you combine it with that role-based access control and kind of enabling the COE from an automation perspective to build and kind of control how end users are actually using generative AI.
Makes sense.
Awesome. So when we talk about that, novel use cases, right, for AI, what we've done, at UiPath is we have a perspective on really how to think about it, right? Because that's, we all want to understand, generative AI is awesome, but how do I really bring it into my organization? And so what we've done is from a use cases and bringing it into your automations, we've really broken it down into 3 simplified patterns, right? An actual use case where you go and implement this is most likely going to use a combination of these patterns. But to kind of simplify it and help you start to think of where you can start to plug in those LLMs or plug in generative AI, we break it down into these 3 patterns or flows, right? The first is reader-writer. This is kind of using an LLM at its most simplest, right? Taking a lot of data from different sources, right? And UiPath can really help access that data, access that information, bring it together, and then ask the LLM to do something with that information, right? And that, in this pattern 1 is going to be to summarize it, right? So take a lot of content, make it a little bit of content, extract specific content from that source data and write new content, or even generate something like an email, right? Creating a new piece of content to use downstream. So that's kind of more the reader-writer, right? Taking some data and then doing something simple with it, whether that's taking it and making it simplified or expanding upon it. The next kind of evolution of that, the pattern itself is still very similar, but we're asking the LLM to do something a little different. And in this case, we're still taking data from multiple sources, multiple locations, but we're now asking the LLM to actually analyze that information and make a decision or provide some more additional data. So this could be, help the LLM ingest information, ingest data, analyze that data, and then make a decision, right? Validate that data. Decide what we should do based on that data. And then from that next best action or from that output, UiPath can go and execute off of that, right? And go and execute automatically into those systems. So it really becomes fully touchless, fully kind of hands off. The last pattern is something kind of more familiar that we're more familiar with. Again, this is very similar to interacting with those chat interfaces, right? ChatGPT and Bard and some of the other ones out there where there's a conversational interface, right? And you're having a discussion with the LLM, you're asking it something, it's spitting back some information to you. And so really traditionally, right, it's just giving you responses, but taking it to that next level of actually acting off of that response is really where this pattern 3 kind of comes to that next level, right? So if the LLM says to go to system A and do XYZ, UiPath can go ahead and actually act on it. And then also, as you're conversing with that interface, UiPath can help provide some knowledge, some more tailored responses to the LLM so that you're not just getting generic responses out, you're getting responses that are related to your organization, your information, and your data. Now, pattern 3, we're actually coming out with some package solutions for this assistant type flow as well. So more to come in like the next few months, but we are coming out with some solutions that are kind of all encompassing there. On the next kind of couple of slides, you'll see for each of these patterns, some use case examples that we dive into as well. So when we think about pattern 1, right, some areas and some example use cases to kind of help you think about, how you can really bring it in are listed down here. We'll also, share this deck, and I'm sure, and the webinar is recorded as well, so you can go in and dive a little bit deeper. But just some to point out, here at UiPath, we're actually exploring this in the bottom left, the legal security GDPR writer for RFPs, right? A common thing that's done often where you need to fill out information on an RFP, and that information is coming from multiple sources, multiple locations, but you want that to kind of be pre-filled. And so that's kind of an example of where UiPath is, we're using an automation to basically provide that source information to the LLM and having it write out what we need to fill in for that RFP automatically. Another example that we have a customer actually working towards is this clinical trial data summarization. So in the healthcare space, there's clinical trial submissions that have to be done to regulators, and a good chunk of it, they want, UiPath is what's actually filling out the form and submitting that data because it has to be exact, has to be consistent. But then there's an aspect to that submission that requires a summarization of the data, summarization of the findings. So that's where, as part of that process, the LLM is being brought in to actually write a summary based on that read-in data, and then include that in the submission to the regulators. Really saving clinician time. So these are just a couple of examples of this reader-writer pattern. For pattern 2, one example, which we'll also see a demo for, is going to be two-way match, right? Where we're taking, and ingesting data from 2 different tables, one from a purchase order, one from an invoice. The LLM is analyzing it and then making a decision on if the data matches or not, and UiPath is executing off of it, seamlessly bringing in human in the loop as well. So these are just, a couple examples of pattern 1 and pattern 2, hopefully to help you kind of get the ball rolling and think about where you can bring in an LLM into automations that you might be building or working on today. Pattern 3 as well, I mentioned, right? This is the assistant pattern, right? Something we're very familiar with, right? Things like self-service help desk, learning assistance, personalized assistance. And again, we're going to be coming out with some kind of all-encompassing solutions for this type of pattern as well here at UiPath. Check. Yep. So onto the demos, right? And I mentioned earlier, we wanted to kind of show you some real world use cases of where you can actually bring in an LLM and how it can actually work as part of an automation flow. And so here we have a two-way match invoice processing demo, right? Something you may have built traditionally. You may even have some of these, or it could be a three-way match running in your organization today. But really in this type of pattern, one area you can plug in an LLM is to do some of the data analysis, right? And so, in this solution that we have here and in the demo, what you'll see is we use document understanding to actually extract data from that invoice that's coming in. The automation is going to go grab context from SAP as well, grab that PO data. We'll send both tables through a prompt to the LLM. In this case, it's Azure or OpenAI. The LLM we're basically as part of the prompt asking it to compare the tables, right? And make sure that the data is all matching. If it doesn't match, it'll go to Action Center. If it's matching, it'll go straight through processing. Really the key here is from a development perspective, from a solution perspective, one, we don't have to build all the rules out, to actually go and check the table to iterate through it. Instead, we can just more simply add the two data tables to a prompt, send it to the LLM, and the LLM takes care of all the complexities of actually understanding the data and analyzing it and making a decision on the output. So really, it speeds up development, but it also allows you to handle things more dynamically, right? If the columns change, if some of the data points change, it's still going to understand that, hey, I have to compare these two tables and make a decision on do they match or not.
So if the line item says professional services hourly and the invoice has hours for a person, it most likely will match those two based on the amounts and things like that.
Exactly. You'll get a lot of
It would be
semantic
impossible to
matching.
do that without an LLM, because that is actually a very difficult thing to do, line items to POs, because I'll give you our own example. When we submit our invoices, our line items never match exactly the line item on the PO from text to text. It's just whatever finance feels like they put in there. So
Yeah.
this is really interesting.
Yeah, it's really, that semantic matching is really where it comes in handy, right? Exactly, like you mentioned. And so in this demo here, right, there's this invoice that we have to process. You'll see as part of the automation itself, we have these different prompt templates. That first one does kind of some more data analysis, data massaging. The second one is more where we add the two tables together and send it to the LLM. But so, when you're thinking about building this within your automations, you can easily add some of these prompt templates into the flows themselves. But so here we have it kick off. DU happened behind the scenes. It extracted data from that invoice that we had pulled up. That PO number that we got, we can now go into SAP and the robot can go and actually extract more context, right? So more data from another system. And then we can combine that PO data and the invoice data into one prompt and ask generative AI to find any discrepancies. If it finds a discrepancy, we can seamlessly have a human in the loop, right? And so here you're seeing a seamless way for a human to go in and validate the generative AI results. We were able to throw in pretty easily the generative AI explanation. So you can see that, hey, it found two issues with two different rows within the invoice and the purchase order. So it said, hey, the quantity is not correct for that first line item, and the unit price isn't correct for the second line item. And if we go into SAP, we can actually see that it was able to get this correctly. So I'll just take a quick pause there. So, a couple of things to point out, right? In a similar way that Ahmed, you mentioned, some of the semantic matching, right? On some of the tables, you'll have a material number, but you'll have it called material in the purchase order, for example, or you'll have short text, right? We have a description of what that item is, but it doesn't necessarily match exactly to what is in that purchase order. And so the generative AI model is able to understand that, hey, these line items match up together. So we need to compare the data points kind of one-to-one without you having to iterate through and try to figure out what should be the fuzzy matching logic or the rules that we have to put in place. And again, the key here too is going to be that human in the loop, right? You want a human to go in and take a look at the data, right? Make that additional check. And so that action center becomes really powerful.
I think that's really important, that human in the loop part. Models are never going to be perfect, so.
Yeah, and with generative AI, they always give a different answer, right?
It's interesting. I think we'll talk a little bit about there. Pablo had a question as well in terms of security. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening there towards the end. So Pablo, hang in there. We'll answer your question on that.
Yeah. And then one other demo I wanted to show as well. This one's a little bit more of a complex use case and actually takes advantage of something called embeddings when we talk about generative AI. You may have heard of this, especially when you deal with large data sets, right? You need to leverage embeddings to actually provide that information, provide that context to the model. In this case, we're actually using as part of the adverse events. So for those that don't know, adverse events is really you take a medication and you are not supposed to get purple spots in your head, but you get purple spots in your head. You have to submit basically, or people end up submitting, right, different forms or adverse event notifications, right? And so pharmaceutical companies have to be aware of this. They have to monitor this. And this is a continuous process. It's always ongoing as long as the drug is out there, in the world, right, being consumed. And so there's a bunch of different sources that this information can come in from. That's where things like communications mining, document understanding, some of that, LLM technology, communications mining, and then specialized AI and document understanding, that can come together to help with extracting those adverse event symptoms. But then what you have to get to is actually encoding those symptoms into kind of a universal number code system that is required by regulators. Now, this can take a lot of time, especially for clinicians, because, right, clinicians, one, they're expensive, right? They have a lot of knowledge, so their time is pretty valuable. And so having them kind of spend time at actually doing this in coding kind of more manually, the more you can reduce that, the more savings you'll have, and just the better kind of overall experience of actually doing the encodings for these adverse events. And so what you can do here in this type of use case is actually plug in an LLM, plug in generative AI to help with suggesting those encodings. And so what you'll see in the demo is that adverse event, those symptoms are basically extracted by document understanding. We have an LLM come in and actually suggest what we call our MEDRA codes. So just 8-digit numbers that basically match up to symptoms. We have it suggest what those codes should be. And so a clinician now, through human in the loop, through Action Center, can just quickly go in, validate or review if those encodings are correct, make any adjustments, and then submit it to regulators as needed. And so this really helps speed up that process of encoding, but also make sure that we're using the latest and greatest MEDRA encodings, because you'll see there's this sub process that runs that actually has us go out to the MEDRA database, check for any updated codes, new codes, because these can change all the time. And then so, when you add that to this embedding vector, the LLM always has the latest context, latest understanding of what those codes are, and can make sure that you're coding everything correctly. So I'll jump ahead a little bit. We will go, I think I'll leave it on this.
Yeah, so interestingly, I think this may be a good point to answer some of Pablo's question.
Yeah.
You say Azure OpenAI. I think what's really interesting is about this question. The question really is the company's biggest concerns are privacy and security and sending confidential data into ChatGPT, which is not an option. I think early on when all the buzz was about OpenAI, and that's why in the beginning in the definition was talk about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is technically just a product by OpenAI that is a chat interface to their LLM model. Fast forward a couple of months, and it's mind blowing how fast these things are moving. Microsoft has hosted the service that powers ChatGPT. Not the same thing, but the service that powers ChatGPT in their own environment, which means you now have, it is like any other Microsoft service that you use. Your company might be using, Document, or you might be using OCR service from Microsoft, might be using Lewis, which was the older, natural language processing service, or any of the number of services that Microsoft Azure provides. That is in there. So I noticed that you had put through Microsoft Azure's OpenAI in there. So I assume if your organization is open to using the cloud, which I don't know how many organizations would answer no to that today, but that means that you're at least you have Microsoft's backing on that. The second big thing I think so there was all these like news items where somebody from Samsung put in code that went into ChatGPT, that went into training the model. So I think a lot of those concerns, especially with Microsoft coming in, have been addressed in terms of what happens to your data, what is done with your data, how long is it stored, so on and so forth. So that's one aspect of it. There's other aspects of where we have been talking to some folks where folks have been using services in the middle to prevent any PII going out to the model, right? So even if you don't end up trusting Microsoft, you say, okay, fine, you can analyze the prompt because that's how the data goes out, and or the other way is to put as Dhruv had mentioned, embeddings or documents or your data for the LLM to use. Again, I think the Microsoft's Azure implementation of OpenAI's service addresses most if not all of these concerns. I think in my conversations with most folks, they have been satisfied that Microsoft has this figured out in terms of compliance, security, and it's not any different than any of the other services. Dhruv and Joe, I'd put it back to you in terms of from a UiPath perspective, we know that UiPath is SOC 2 compliant and
Mhm.
HIPAA compliant and all of that stuff. Are there any, I assume all of those security compliance governance policies apply to this service as well. You want to talk a little bit about that also?
Yeah, I mean, when you're using things like integration service, right? All the kind of data security through UiPath will still apply. Granted, it's still an API call, right? So if you're bringing in a different LLM, whether it's the Azure one or something else, whatever their end policies are at that model level is still going to need to apply to what you want, right? But the actual connection to it will still have some of the security and governance that's built into the UiPath platform. Plus, you get that added benefit of the additional audit logs, the additional auditability that we have as well, right? So you can now more, as soon as you mentioned earlier, provide a report out on how things were done, who was using it, and kind of get, not just the audit logs from us, but combine that maybe with some of the security capabilities within the LLM that you're using as well.
Perfect. And the reason why I brought it up here was because we're talking about a fairly regulated industry, the pharma industry, and I'm sure security is a big concern. If any of these adverse effects were to be leaked, I'm sure it would have a big impact on the stock of the of the company. So considering that's how serious this is, and they're using UiPath, that should give you some confidence in the security and the measures in place, both by the Azure's OpenAI service and UiPath.
Yeah. Plus, in this scenario too, we're only sending the symptoms, so you kind of absolve away the PII, right? And that's like another example of controlling the data that actually goes to the LLM and is ingested and looked at. So the PII is removed. It's just the symptom on its own, anonymized, is sent, encoded, and provided back. And so that way you have that guardrail kind of built in.
Absolutely. We've used patterns where we use a cognitive service to figure out if there's PII in the prompt, and then replace it with other. The funny thing was, it just, masking doesn't work. Putting X's doesn't work because the LLMs actually gives weights to proper nouns and verbs and numbers and things like that. So you couldn't just replace a name with XXX, because then it doesn't do what you want it to do. So we have the pattern of replacing, obfuscating by replacement. So I would replace your name with some other name, and then send it over to the LLM and then replace it on the way back.
Yeah, two other things I'd mention there too are like, there's the question of security for sure, but there's also the question of customer choice, right? Like Microsoft, OpenAI, they're doing incredible work, but many of you all on the call, I'm sure, work with other providers for your LLMs. You might have even have created your own AI models, perhaps with AI Center with UiPath. So our purpose is to give folks a level of choice, right? So you can securely interact with Microsoft's products for sure, but you can incorporate your own AI models. You can incorporate Amazon's, Google's. We want to offer a level of choice. And then the other thing I'd mention is just the question of price. I think a lot of us have realized how costly going out to an LLM for every single request can get. So the more that you can do, especially if you have your own specialized AI models that can run more efficiently within your environment, and maybe you only incorporate the external call to the LLM for something that's not as intensive in the process, and you can help defray your costs that way too.
Perfect. Awesome. We interrupted your demo, Dhruv, but I thought it was a really important topic, which I think is a top of mind for a lot of folks.
No, it's a perfect topic. I mean, this is a perfect time to bring it in, and I'll let this kind of run, speak to it a little bit as we go, maybe even fast forward through some of it. But no worries at all. So there you saw was a document we need to process. Basically, we need to extract the adverse event from it. Excuse me. The automation kicks off. The first step is just showing you what that sub-process would look like. You can have the automation go out to this Medra encoding list, wherever that list of codes and the corresponding symptoms are located, grab that and kind of add it to that knowledge database that the LLM is going to use downstream, right? So, it does that. The first step then is to go and actually use document understanding to extract data, right? You want data to be extracted consistently, more accurately, and so that's really where that specialized AI comes in handy with UiPath document understanding. So we can easily extract the information from that FTA form, Once we have that data extracted, right, the biggest part being the symptoms, the next step, and so here you'll see kind of some human in the loop. We can go and validate that extraction. But the next step after that is to then go and validate the metric encodings. So first, we'll go ahead and look at the document understanding extraction, right? Make sure everything was extracted correctly. We can see that extracted symptoms. We extracted some patient information. You could extract all the data from this form, but just for the demo, we only extracted a couple kind of key pieces of information. Right, so you could go and make some corrections. Now that that's all good, the next step is to bring in that LLM, right? Here's where we want to do that measure encoding with the generative AI technology. And so we'll bring it in here. And in a moment, you'll see how we can have human in the loop to validate some of that generative AI execution. Give it a quick refresh. And there we go. We can see that a new task was added. And so what you're seeing on this screen here, and what's really important and how the LLM was able to help support this process was the LLM looked at the symptoms that were listed here and it suggested the right codes from the encoding that we need automatically, just based on the description here, right? So now as a clinician, right, you could think that, it might take me a long time to try to think of what are the right codes. I might have to kind of swivel chair and look at the database of codes and manually type it in. The benefit here is the LLM suggested the top, 10, 15 codes for me, and I could go in and kind of fine tune it. I could add my own codes if I needed to, and I could seamlessly see the document, see where that adverse event description is coming from, and also see how it was extracted. So this really speeds up kind of that encoding capability using generative AI. You could think of this, this could be used for other types of encoding scenarios or coding scenarios that you might be running into today in your industries and in your organizations. And then lastly, we have this ICH kind of format that we have to basically take the adverse events and format them into this ICH E2B format. And so we can have the automations to automatically put it in that kind of more structured format that's required to be sent to regulators. So you can see we put in some of that metadata, and we also put in the codes, right? So those codes that were selected and kind of finalized in Action Center, as well as the actual reaction that the patient had or that adverse event. So pretty seamless way to have kind of a more complex scenario and use an LLM to really solve that challenging problem. Now, we talked, that was kind of more that, exploring novel use cases with generative AI. What we briefly want to touch on too is we are adding it to the products themselves as well. So what you'll start to see in the coming kind of few months are different ways, within the UiPath products, you'll start to see some GPT capabilities to help you build automations, build AI, specialized AI models faster. One such example is bringing GPT or generative AI technology into our document understanding process. So you'll see we'll start to have activities to help you do classification with GPT or generative AI, do extraction with generative AI, and even do pre-labeling, right? So if you're going to train a specialized model, you can use generative AI to help with pre-labeling and just speed up kind of the time to value it takes to train a model with your documents and go through the whole labeling process as well. Now we're also bringing it into the developer kind of view as well. So within Studio, specifically first it'll be Studio Web, we're going to be adding in something called Wingman, where you can basically just go to the projects, add in a description for the automation you're trying to build out. And when you hit run, Wingman will automatically create that Studio Web workflow for you as well. So you don't have to sit there and kind of drag and drop the activities one by one. Just based on natural language, that description will automatically lead to an automation being built out that you can run and start to execute. So really speeding up the time to development and how you can build out automations using generative AI.
That's awesome. This is my co-pilot for UiPath. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. And then lastly, clipboard AI. So this is very similar to like pattern 3, right? The kind of assistant. You may have heard a little bit of clipboard AI last year when we released it, if you were at Forward or watched some of our webinars. But really what it is it's universal copy paste. So you could copy from any source to any destination. It could be Excel, it could be an application. And then, you could copy data from an invoice, from a purchase order, from an unstructured document, from Excel and copy that information across. What Clipboard AI will do is automatically extract the information that's relevant from that source and automatically semantically match and figure out where that data needs to go and paste in. So you could think of this as kind of a ready-to-go automation, pre-built out. You don't have to do any development. You just deploy it, and it really takes care of doing the extraction, doing the semantic matching, and doing the semantic pasting.
So
It actually,
I could drop an invoice into Clipboard AI, hit Control C, then go to the SAP screen that has the invoice that needs me to do invoice total inputs, and do Control V, and it just figures out that the total needs to go on this field in this screen.
exactly. Yep.
That's cool. That is very
It is, yeah, and it uses a GPT for your generative AI capabilities, plus it uses our specialized AI models. So it decides based on what it's looking at, what model to pull in automatically on the flies.
This is kind of cool, because this is not so for the techies and geeks here, I assume this is a multimodal thing, because you're actually looking at the screen from a visual perspective, inspecting it, and then figuring out where things are.
Yep.
Based on some text that you have on the right-hand side of Invoice.
Yeah, and that's really the power, right, of AI and machine learning. It's not using these models in silos, it's orchestrating them together. And that could be in an end-to-end process, like we saw in some of those use case examples where it's, we use document understanding, and we use generative AI or the LLM, and we're using them kind of sequentially on the inputs and outputs. But then there's also, ways like this with Clipboard AI, we're using them all in parallel, depending on what, needs to be done kind of on the fly. And so that's really where you start to get the power of AI, machine learning, and automation kind of all packaged together.
That is very cool. That's very cool.
And it's in preview right now. So if you are interested in actually getting hands-on with this Clipboard AI, if you have your phone handy, you can go ahead and scan that QR code. You sign up for the Insider program, and you can get access to Clipboard AI and start playing around with it today.
That's pretty cool.
Awesome. So I guess now we'll
We'll open
right
it up
on time.
Yeah. I think Dhruv and Joe, while people think of questions, I would ask you, at least Dhruv, you're on the sales side of the house.
Yep.
Give us a from what you're seeing, and you guys have a pretty big sales force and a pretty big presence, especially in the automation space. Where are we? Are we still, we're exploring? Are we have some pilot projects in production, or we're just thinking about pilot projects, or we've done a few and we're opening this up to the organization in terms of, and contextually, I'm talking about generative AI services and things like that.
Yeah. So at least from, I can kind of chime in first from my experiences. We have customers today that are we're working with to basically go through the pilots of bringing generative AI into their automations. So, one, it's to get some stories out there, but also to help actually make this real, right? And we go through kind of a similar deck with them. We'll do workshops, do kind of design think sessions, and we actually have some that are in the process of being developed out now. So we've done some of those design think sessions, and soon to be starting those pilots if they haven't started already as well.
A lot of exploration, early stages of pilots going in, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of customers, and this is where everybody is, right? We're still trying to figure out where is the best place to pull it in, right? You gotta consider a lot of things, right? Is generative AI good for this use case? Is specialized AI a better fit for this use case? Is it a combination of the two? How do we think about costs, right? These are all things that, we want to keep kind of top of mind, and we discuss with the customers to really understand, when is it a good fit? When is there a better option or an alternative?
I have so many questions, but I'm gonna limit these in order of priority. What I have geeky questions. What models people are using? Are they deploying on-prem, and LangChain and all of those questions? But I'll put those aside. Biggest concerns. When you talk about this, when you show this to either the CIO, the CISO, the CFO, the chief compliance officer, what are the biggest concerns that you're hearing, and possibly how people are saying, yes, it's a concern, but we've covered it this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think Drew touched on one of them. Security certainly it always comes up. Just figuring out the choice of which models to incorporate in your automation, and the price considerations for that as well. So again, if you want to have your own model that's not as costly, that you could pull into an automation. Again, the story is about orchestration. So we want to give customers the options to pull in what's most efficient for them. Another big concern that I hear is just, what is the impact on education for these tools? Like, as amazing as they are, they're going to have a dramatic impact, both in a corporate setting, but also, certainly for universities. Like, I know if any of you all have friends or kids in college, like, everybody is thinking about the ramifications about using ChatGPT and other similar solutions for essays and everything else. So I'm really excited about the work that especially our academy team and our academic alliance team is doing to put more information out there to universities. So actually this October at our next Forward in Las Vegas, October 9th through 12th, we're going to have a session with our academic alliance, some customers, and also the University of Washington. And they're going to tackle this issue head on. What's scary about AI for education, whether you're talking about for enterprise education and continuing to learn for all of us as we go around our careers, or at the university level. And one thing that's come up in some of the pre-meetings is, a lot of COEs are starting to think about how they can evolve from automation COEs, pure play kind of RPA, to now AI COEs, and becoming the center for an organization to learn about AI solutions, to learn about the safeguards, to figure out how to incorporate it into their existing automations and some of the new patterns that Dhruv mentioned. So education comes up a ton too, and just the ramifications for how we all will keep up with all these things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned that. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and said, and we said, since childhood we've been trained to find the right answer. I think it has to change upside down, and we're going to be now trained to ask the right question.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Prompt engineering, right? We hear it all the time, but
absolutely. No, that's amazing. I think we're almost at time. I really appreciated Joe, Dhruv. I really appreciate you guys giving us some time to do this. Our email addresses were flashing on the screen earlier. You can always reach out to us through LinkedIn or the email that you got for the confirmation of this webinar. We look forward to working with UiPath and all of you to bring more of these innovations to your workplace. Thank you so much, Dhruv, Joe. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Take care. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.